Uh, Today, I'm speaking with Mr. Moses Serugo from Kampala, Uganda. He's a film curator and also active in the distribution of films in his own country, Uganda and Africa. Good morning, Moses.
Good morning.
How are you? How is everything?
Everything is fine. Kampala is a bit chilly this morning, but I know the sun will come up like later on in the afternoon, but we're doing good.
Everything excellent. Right now, I want to ask you first about your activities. How did you start to work in the cinema field?
Um, uh, my work in film or in the cinema industry started in 2009. That's after I'd quit my job as an arts journalist at a leading newspaper, the leading independent newspaper here called the Daily Monitor. So when I quit Daily Monitor, I needed an outlet for my creative writing because I was principally an arts journalist. I'd actually wanted to become a film critic, but then I realized that I watch a lot of films and I watch a lot of TV. And I felt the quality of our films was not that good. So I wanted to start out from the bottom of the bottom rung of the ladder, which is screenwriting. So I got into a couple of screenwriting labs, Mnet Screenwriters Lab for East Africa. And then I went for the Maisha Film Lab. The Maisha Film Lab is run by Mira Nair, the director. She's done Queen of Katwe, she's done Salam Bombe, she's done Mississippi Masala. So I went to Zanzibar in 2009 still for the lab, and then I came to Kampala for the main lab. And I worked on a short film as an assistant director. It's called Dawa. But I got to realize that film is an expensive venture. You need a lot of resources, you need a lot of money, and I was really hungry to start on my short film, because when you join the Maisha Film Lab, you submit a raw script, a 10-page script, which is which has the possibility of being workshopped into a short film, a short 10-minute film. So when that didn't come through in regards to, because I wanted actually to turn that short film into a feature. So I joined the Amakula Kampala International Film Festival as a PR manager because they wanted someone who had a bit of journalistic experience. So my work as an arts journalist stood me in good stead because I had the media relations that would run a PR campaign. So I joined Amakula, the Kampala International Film Festival, the first independent film festival actually in Uganda at the time. And luckily, while I was doing my PR work, I stumbled onto their African collection. They had quite a vast DVD collection of independent films. If you're the kind of person who used to watch Al Jazeera's Fabulous Picture Show, most of the films on Fabulous Picture Show, Amakula had them. But more interestingly for me was the African films. So because it's during my work at Amakula that I got introduced to most of Usman Sembene's films. I got introduced to Raoul Peck's film Lumumba, which is one of my favorite African films. Yeah, so I worked with Amakula. I attended the international festivals. I'd been to ZIF in Zanzibar. I'd been to the Durban International Film Festival in 2010 as a Durban talent. Then I also went to FESPACO in Ouagadougou in 2013. And I felt that most of these films were ending their journey at festivals and not being watched back home, because the dominance of Hollywood and Bollywood is quite profound. Cinemas here give preference to those two cinematic genres. So I felt, no, Africans need to start watching films from and about the continent. So that's how African Movie Night Kampala started in 2015.
Excellent. And right now, African Movie Night, you are very active. I receive regularly messages from you on WhatsApp and Twitter, correct? Your Facebook pages. Tell me about the venue. Where do you screen in Kampala, the films?
We screen at the National Theatre. The National Theatre is principally a performing arts space for stage plays. But They sort of reworked the stage. So there's a retractable screen on the stage. When a screening is needed, you have, there's a way that the screen will come from top to bottom. They have a high resolution projector, and the audio is quite good. Now, that is also a challenge in a way, because when I set out to start African Movie Night Kampala, I wanted an ideal cinema setting, you know, with Dolby surround sound and all that. But the cinemas insisted they needed the films on DCP. And for the most part, the films we were getting were on DVD. So we couldn't use the cinemas precisely because of that. But then the cinemas were also very expensive, because for a cinema screening, just one screening, they required of us to pay $1,000 per screening, which is a lot of money, because like I said, they don't quite prioritize anything outside Hollywood and Bollywood, because the cinemas here are pretty much an extension of the American studio system. They have a way they share the proceeds, I'm told, from the box office and all that. Now, given that we're not in that ecosystem, they told us your best option, since you don't even have a guaranteed market, or you can't guarantee that audiences will come, you'll have to hire the cinema hall at $1,000 per screening. So the National Theatre, being a cultural institution here, decided to partner with us. They were like, okay, fine, but we won't give you the prime days, which are the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They decided to give us Tuesdays. So we initially started off screening on Tuesdays at the National Theatre. At that time, I must caution, their projector was down, so I had to invest in a projector. And luckily, there are people I'd spoken to and explained to them our vision as African Movie Night. So we got most of the films as donations, since these people were excited about their films being introduced to a new market. So especially for our first year, the first 12 films we showed, because we were showing one film a month. The first 12 films we showed were actually as African Movie Night, approaching the directors or the producers and explaining to them that, hey, we want to introduce your film to a new market. This is our vision. We want to have more Africans watching films from the continent. And for the most part, they gave us their films.
So right now, to overcome this problem, you couldn't find like a space you can rent and set it up for yourself, and maybe you can have activities all the week, maybe like workshop or stuff like that, like Maisha Film Lab, and then you can do your screening. Did you try to do that as well? Because I think as well, $1,000 is very expensive compared, you know, to I mean Kampala economy, and it's a very big rate.
It's a huge rate, especially considering that the most that we could charge per person coming in for a film was the equivalent of about $3. But from the get-go, I'd done my research. I don't know if you've heard about the Bioscope Cinema in Johannesburg, in South Africa, or the Labia Theatre in Cape Town. But let me talk about the Bioscope Cinema, because the Bioscope Cinema only shows independent films. So we really wanted a cinema setting. And for the whole initiative to make sense, we wanted to offer box office sort of statistics, because we wanted to tell the producers that, hey, you know what, this is how your film performed in Kampala. But we didn't have a cinema of our own, because the plan was this: we're actually going to show these films 7 days a week. You know, after a week's screenings, then we'll give you the box office numbers for that. Unfortunately, our idealism didn't work in that regard. We didn't really want to go into the whole workshop setup. We considered having talkbacks, but even setting up Skype connections with the directors, because we did try to fly in some directors, but that also became very expensive. You had to do partnerships with airlines and hotels, and then have to pay per diems, you know, that sort of thing. We didn't have the resource envelope. for that. But to answer your question, yes, we actually thought about a festival because from the very beginning, Africa Day, which is May 25th, has been one of our biggest sort of like calendar events that we wanted to celebrate with films. For the most part, Africa Day is about food, fashion, and music. But we're like, no, how about we add an element of film to Africa Day? And our plan was to curate 10 films, 2 films from each region on the continent, 2 films from North Africa, from East Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, and West Africa. But all that pretty much fell through. And we just had to make lemonade with the lemons we've been handed. So we had to settle for showing 1 film a month. And if you are not available on that Tuesday, you'd have to miss the film because we couldn't even give out or make copies of the DVDs because we're under strict instruction. The DVDs are for cinematic exhibition, so to speak. So we respected the fact that the producers and directors had trusted us with the films, and we categorically refused to copy the films. At times we'd get Blu-ray discs, which meant hiring a Blu-ray player or a Sony PlayStation. And at times the producers would require us to return the DVDs. But it is what it is, at least especially in our first year, because our first year was the most profound year for me. The 12 films that we showed, because I can run you through the films. We started off with Veve, which is a One Fine Day film in January. Then February being a romantic month, we did a film called Zamora by Shams Banji. I think it won an award in Zanzibar, but the screenwriter for that is the one who gave us the copy of the film. And then March is Women's Month. So we did Desert Flower. I don't know if you've watched Desert Flower. It's about Waris Diri. It's actually based on a book. Waris Diri, the lady who came from Somalia to become an international model, fashion model, but it addresses the issues of female genital mutilation. Then April is Rwanda Genocide Month. So I got to speak to Raoul Peck, who agreed for us to show sometimes in April, a film that he's done. And then May is Africa Month, still with the with the graciousness of Raoul Peck. We go to show Lumumba in May. And interestingly, the thing about Lumumba is we have 2 Lumumba landmarks in Kampala. There's a Lumumba Avenue and there's a university hall at Makerere, the biggest university here, called Lumumba Hall. But for the most part, most people didn't know why those 2 landmarks were named after Lumumba. You know, they didn't know who Lumumba was. So we introduced them to Lumumba. In June, we screened a film called Danwa, another donation from the director. It had won at the Amakula Kampala International Film Festival that year as the best feature. And it's a very interesting take on, you know, the crime scene and the underbelly of Dar es Salaam. So the director donated to us that film and we showed it. Then in July, we showed a film called Nothing for Mahala from South Africa, which teaches money and values, another donation from the producers, Heartline South Africa. Now in August, that has been our most successful film. Chimamanda's film, Half of a Yellow Sun. I was trying to remember that, Half of a Yellow Sun. Interestingly, Half of a Yellow Sun is based on a book. So the people who had read the book were curious to see if the film had done justice to the book. Unfortunately, some of them got disappointed, but those who came and watched the film and hadn't read the book sort of wanted to go and buy the book. Now, which is where we actually want to focus as African Movie Night Kampala, because if we were to go into a workshop and going into making our own films, we have a rich literature treasure trove in Uganda. So the plan then, if we're going to go into workshops and all that, would be to adapt literary works for the big screen. In much the same way you have the adapted screenplay at the Oscars. So if we're going to do workshops, we're going to have to go into creating a new breed of screenwriters that can adapt literary works for the big screen. Yeah, then September we showed Man on Ground. Man on Ground is by Akin Omotoso, but the lead actor, Fabian Lojede, was my friend. And he donated the film to us still. So we managed to show Man on Ground, which had shown in Toronto and the Dubai International Film Festival, but had really had no chance of coming to Kampala. October is Nigeria's Independence Month. So we got a film called Gone Too Far, which addresses the migrant issues between Nigeria and the UK. Then November, we had a slapstick comedy called Between Friends, which essentially has these university friends meeting again after 7 years, and there are all these unresolved issues regarding their university days. And then December, being Kenya Independence Month, we showed a film called House of Lungula, which was also just us sending an email to the producers and explaining to them that, hey, it's Kenya Independence Month. We want to show a Kenyan film, and House of Lungula is one of those popular films. So they were like, okay, that's interesting. We'll actually send you a couple of DVDs for sale if you want to. So they sent us the film gratis. We didn't have to pay any screening rights for that. And for all the DVD sales that we made, we wired the money back to them. So it's pretty much been that. But like I said, Africa Day still remains a cardinal day for us. We still want to do those 10 films and especially introduce people here to North African cinema, especially those who can't come to the Luxor African Film Festival or the film festival in Carthage. And then hidden gems, because Southern Africa is not just about South Africa. There's some good films that have come out of, say, Malawi, films like The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. There are films from West Africa that are not necessarily Nigerian, and there are films from Central Africa that are not necessarily from DR Congo or from Rwanda. So that's the broader vision we've always had beyond workshops, because there are so many people here who do workshops. We've opted to leave the workshops to those people. And for the most part, they're just crash courses, in film. Of course, we don't have a film academy here. We have to understand that to do films, you have to go to the University of Google and YouTube. Crash courses of 1, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's a craft. People have challenges with equipment and all that. But we believe if, say, we went the route of adapting an already established literary work into film, that will stand us in good stead, because that way a film markets itself. The book is already there. The film is just riding on the back of the success of a book. Hopefully we'll do successful books. But then if a book hasn't sold and there's a film and people know that it's adapted from a book, it will probably do well for the author to be able to make additional sales from the book, knowing well that their book has been adapted into film. Yeah, so that's the plan.
Excellent. And Moses, tell me, did COVID affect your work and affected the community around you in the last months?
Yeah, 4 months actually. Yes, COVID has affected African Movie Night so profoundly, I must say, because we had our last screening on March 7th, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a day or two before Women's Day. We had a film called Bed of Thorns that addresses domestic violence in relationships, not necessarily homes, or not necessarily between married people, but single people who are courting, rather people who are courting and are looking to getting married. So no sooner had we shown that than the country went into an initial lockdown of about 2 weeks or so. So the lockdown here started March 18th, and it's pretty much disrupted, especially the arts, because the public gatherings in regards to culture and faith or religion has not been opened again. So African Movie Night hasn't been able to showcase anything since March, but in our plan, when we were starting, the initial plan, yes, was cinema, gather people together. But we're also looking at new technologies when we started. The second plan was, let's try and establish a TV channel that curates African content, curates African films, curates behind the scenes footage, has trailers. Because the other thing we also noticed is there's an information gap. People don't know about new releases of African films. I must confess, none of the films that we showed was new in the real sense of it had been released a week or a month ago. Some of the films we're showing were 10 years old. When we showed Lumumba, it was 16 years old. So we thought we'd fix that gap by having a TV channel that, well, has films showing back to back, like your movie channels on DSTV or that sort of thing. But we also felt when you're doing your film and you have behind the scenes footage, we can have that informing people about your film, or we can have cast and director interviews, that sort of thing. So the plan with the TV channel was that we'd actually have that and then run it as a free-to-air sort of business, where you have the channel free-to-air here running on digital terrestrial, and then you have adverts paying for, the running of the business, and that way you'll give the producer or the filmmaker a little bit of money, thanking them for their effort in regards to film. The other alternative was having a pay TV channel on either DSTV or Star Times or Zuku or Azam, because we don't have a dedicated Pan-African TV channel on any of these platforms, especially for DSTV, because DSTV has been the biggest disappointment here. When they talk of Africa Magic, it's actually just one narrative, Nollywood. Yes, with all due respect, it's the biggest industry on the continent, but there's more to African film than just Nollywood. So why don't you just call it Nollywood Magic? Why are you calling it Africa Magic when it's just one narrative that's being pushed, and yet you'll most likely get a film from each of the 54 countries on the continent. So that is still in plan. We were planning that, like, say, if you have a bank like ABSA, Pan-African bank like ABSA, and it's running a campaign like Africanacity, you can have the TV commercials, running on such a Pan-African TV initiative, and then, the business will probably pay for itself, but still pie in the sky, castle in the sky, we're still considering that. And then the other was a streaming platform. But this time, the streaming platform would be for the diaspora, Africans in the diaspora. Because there's something interesting about Ugandans, especially who live in the diaspora. They always want that attachment from home. They're always telling you, oh, send me the food, send me an artifact, send me a painting, or send me a mat, send me a rug, a carpet, something functional. So we imagine, since if they have the demand for such products, then, excuse me, the demand for African stories or stories from Uganda is also one thing they'll probably like, So the plan was to do something pretty much like what Netflix is doing. But the reality is all these need money. We've done a couple of pitches. We've tried to get into the Tony Elumelu Foundation to try and see if we can get money from there. We're trying to look for venture capitalists to see if they believe in this Pan-African dream. Yeah, but right about now, the lockdown has affected us big time, because the cinemas, even the ones that show Hollywood and Bollywood films, are not open. They tried to reach out to the Ministry of Health to see if they could implement the standard operating procedures of social distancing. You sanitize before you get into the cinema. You're wearing a face mask, and then there's about 2 empty seats in between, the patrons. But even the Hollywood people are not in business, and there are not even any films coming out of Hollywood anyway. So the industry is pretty much in lockdown. But interestingly, at the beginning of the lockdown, there were 4 Ugandan short films that were released on YouTube. One film was Rolex, the other one was Yala. Then we had 2 other films. There was a film on mental issues, and then Chifaru. You'll be surprised, especially Rolex. When Rolex was released on Easter Sunday, knowing well that people were at home, it got 40,000 views on YouTube in 24 hours, So you can imagine. I'd imagine when it comes to especially the short film genre, it's quite profitable to release your films on YouTube. And having curated the Kampala Short Film Festival in 2016, where we got 10 short films with a runtime of 120 minutes. and we packaged them into this whole, it's like you were coming to watch a feature film of 120 minutes, but there were 10 short films totaling 120 minutes. I imagined that's a way you can then also harness online platforms, you know, in regards to especially YouTube and Vimeo. I don't know about feature films on those platforms though, but right about now, that's where we are at. I want to aggressively pursue the possibility of doing the TV channel, especially the free-to-air TV channel, knowing well that if I say if I attended the Durban International Film Festival, or if I went to FESPACO, if I went to the Durban International Film, sorry, if I went to the Zanzibar International Film Festival, or if I went to Luxor or Carthage and engaged these producers and filmmakers that, hey, in as much as you want your film to show in Toronto or some Pan-African Film Festival in New York or London, the film has to start its journey on the continent, and people on the continent need to really watch these films.
Yes. Moses, also, I received from you, you know, this campaign about Watoto building, you know.
Yes.
So this seems to be a classic design, you know. In Egypt here we have similar, by the way, design like that, you know. Old cinemas used to be designed like that when they used to have
Oh,
big theaters,
right.
you know, instead of multiplexes. So, can you tell us about it?
That Watoto building now houses a church called Watoto Church. It used to be Kampala Pentecostal Church. So the building was constructed in the 50s by a gentleman called Norman Godino, who I'm told was so much of an escapist. He was a man of culture. He loved the cinema. He loved the arts. I went to a primary school that was also founded by him, Norman Godino Junior School. But when I went there, it was a Uganda Road primary school. Now, the thing about Norman Cinema is when the Indians were expelled by Idi Amin in 1972, the businesses, most of the businesses that were running pretty much, you know, became run down because the Africans in whose hands they were given to manage pretty much didn't have a sense of the business. Only that the gentleman who actually took over Norman Cinema had a love for cinema. But the challenge is that Norman Cinema used to show Hollywood and Bollywood films. So with the distributors not sending in films anymore, there was nowhere he would have gotten films from either the US or India, and we didn't have a thriving film industry at the time. So the building pretty much became run down. It became, you know, like a vermin hotspot. But then in the 80s, some people were like, no, we can turn this place into a theater for stage plays and music shows. So for the better part of the 80s, which was when I was growing up, that's what the so-called Norman Cinema was. And this time it had become the center because they wanted to project it as the center for performing arts. And since my primary school didn't have a hall, a theater hall, we used to also have our theater events at the former Norman Cinema. But then when Watoto Church came in also in the 80s, they felt it was a good ground for their church activities. So they took over the building. It is said they didn't pay for it. It said they may have paid for it. I don't know if they paid the Norman Godino family or they paid some Ugandan here. But the thing about that space is, well, it's now a church. There is word that it's going to be demolished to create way for a 12-storied complex that will have a 3,000-seater auditorium. But the auditorium will be a church, not necessarily a cinema. Then it will have a hotel, I've been told, plus I think offices, because the thing about Kampala skyline these days, you have all these ugly Dubai-like glass structures coming up all over the place. They call them arcades. So they're pretty much like mini malls. The whole of you can walk on Kampala Road and the whole place looks like a bathroom, you know, tiles and mirrors almost all through. But if it were up to me, I would actually advocate for the repossession of that building because like you said, or like you noticed, it was purposely built as a cinema. I'm told it was the the most lavish cinema in Kampala, the first of its kind, and it gave inspiration for the rise of other cinemas like Fido Dido, with like Odeon Cinema. So it's now called Fido Dido. It also houses a church. It gave rise to the Odeon Cinema, which we knew growing up as the 007 house. It gave rise to another cinema called Nita Cinema, that is now a theater, Theater La Bonita. It gave rise to Delight Cinema, which is also now a church. And which is really the tragedy, because I don't know why these church people want to encroach on these art spaces. Yet we know the other faiths like the Protestants, the Catholics, and the Muslims have built their own worship houses from the ground up. So if it were up to me, I would repossess that building, probably repay these people the money that they spent, and repurpose it back to its initial role. Because I want to imagine at the time it was built, it was sitting about 1,500 people. It had 1,500 seats. Right about now in Kampala, if you were to add up the total number of cinema seats, it doesn't even get to 1,000. You know, at the most, I think we have about 700 or to 800 dedicated cinema seats for those people who are running the cinemas. We don't have about 1,000 seats. So you can imagine if I got Norman Cinema back as a cinema, I have my guaranteed 1,000 seats. I've got my film. I'm probably showing it over 7 days. Even if I'm showing I'm doing one screening per day. 1,000 times 7,000 people coming to watch a film is the biggest validation a producer would get, I want to imagine. So when it comes to the Watoto building, if I had it in me, not sounding like a dictator or anything, but if I had the resources, I would buy back the building, repurpose it back to its cinema heyday, and then probably just have movies showing there. And if you've been to it, it's a very lavish space. I mean, the headroom, it's so high, because I used to go there as a child. The ceiling is so high. You imagine, how was it even constructed? The screen is so wide, you know, and then just a whole magical thing, because I'd never experienced retractable seats up until I went there to watch 10 Commandments as a child. And I think a Bud Spencer movie, must have been Trinity is Still My Name. There was something about the area where I think the popcorn used to be, or the box office. It was just lavish in every sense of the way. And it straddles two streets, Kampala Road, then Buganda Road at the top. I mean, if you were in that space, you'd really feel that so many cinema dreams have been made or were made there when it was a glorious cinema.
Yeah.
I want to draw you to the attention of a report called Framing the Shot. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
It's by Dayo Ogunyemi.
Yes.
I don't know if you've read that report, and I'm excited about his strategy in regards to the AFCTA, the Africa Preferential Trade Area, agreement, and how it can push, film, especially the need for co-production arrangements, between countries, and then the fact that Africa has the biggest, youngest population, or one of the biggest, youngest populations in the world. And these are the people who adopt, technology, they adopt trends and all that kind of stuff. So I believe, especially if we go the cinema route, but if we go the TV and streaming platform route, Africa is the future in regards to cinema. The more reason the people who are producing African content and probably thinking that they need the validation of the West, they need their film to open in Toronto, at Cannes or Venice, that sort of thing. I want to imagine Africa is the future. I like the innovation that the Durban International Film Festival has done this time around. I'm looking forward to seeing what Durban as an online experience will be like. I'm hoping that FESPACO happens next year, but I hope it happens in any form. But this is just temporary. There's the talk of the new normal. We're also trying to adjust to the new normal here. So I'm pretty optimistic that the cinema spaces will open, but if and when they don't open in the time they should, let's explore the other avenues. And I'm still pining for television, because I want to imagine television in the interim is the future of an African cinema.
Yes. Thank you, Moses.
You're welcome. Thanks
And
for your time.
I hope to hear some good news about your projects in the upcoming months.
Definitely. I'll keep you updated.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time too.